Welcome, everyone. This is Greg Rock, and we'd like to welcome everybody to our first Meet the Author webcast of 2017. We're thrilled to have both James Taylor and Jan Purchase with us to talk about their brand new book, which just debuted prior to the holidays at the end of last year, Real-World Decision Modeling with DMN, Effective Communication of Decision Making. Many of the folks in our community will recognize James Taylor's name. He's been the editorial director of all things decision modeling and business rules and analytics on our website for the last several years, and heads up that outbound bulletin that we send out on a biweekly basis. And we're thrilled to have Jan with us as well, the co-author with James on this book. And so without further delay, I'm going to turn things over to James Taylor.
All right, thanks, Greg. So a little bit of introduction. So I'm James Taylor. This is my voice, and I run Decision Management Solutions. Besides the training work we do through Brainstorm and the writing we do there, we also help organizations adopt business rules and analytic technologies. And for the last 2 years, we've been very active in decision modeling. We're one of the original submitters of the Decision Model and Notation Standard, personally, I've been focused the last 14, 15 years or so on decision management, business rules, analytics, and increasingly recently on the use of decision modeling in that context. And writing this book, I was joined by Jan Purchase. I'll let Jan introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Jan Purchase, founder of Lux Magi. For the past 16 years, my company's been helping clients in the finance industry to harness business rules management systems to address complex problems. Since 2011, we've specialized in the application of decision management and modeling in finance, specializing particularly in regulatory compliance, which is a very apt application, usually to overcome the challenges of using complex business rules at scale. We also offer decision mining, modeling, mentoring, and training services to our clients. Now, before we go on to answer some of Greg's detailed questions, I'd like to start with a summary of our book's content. In designing the book, James and I wanted to bring our experience of decision modeling to everyone who needs to understand and improve how their organization makes business decisions. Now, this includes people all the way from business subject matter experts and strategists and business analysts who might be charged with identifying, describing, and innovating decision making, through to managers responsible for initiatives to automate and to improve decision-making, and finally, or architects and developers who are working to implement it. The book covers the why, the when, the where, the what, and the how of decision modeling. For example, in the why section, we describe the value of the technique, the business case, if you like, for decision management and modeling, how they're related to each other, and how they mutually reinforce each other. In the when section, we describe how to identify business areas that benefit most from decision modeling so that you can target your efforts more effectively. In the where section, we describe the business context of decision modeling, how it integrates with business data, process, events, analytics, business goals within an organization. In the what section, we describe the business model and notation, DMN, a standard notation for business modeling, which we'll be discussing in a bit more detail later on. The book contains separate chapters that address both newcomers and experienced users of DMN, respectively. And in the how section, we address how to model decisions and how to manage projects that use this technique. And we do this by, first of all, covering 13 common misconceptions of decision modeling and explain why they're wrong. We describe a method for applying the technique to projects all the way from initial decision discovery through to full modeling. We describe 42 best practices for using the technique, and we also include 12 decision model patterns and approaches that reoccur frequently in projects. We provide examples of each one so that readers can repurpose them for their own projects. We've tried to make the book very practical by including 3 major worked examples and over 220 illustrations, many of which are from real projects.
That's great, guys. So let me ask you guys, since we're talking about decision modeling, what kind of decisions, might folks be able to apply the things that they're going to learn in the book, and help our members make the connection between decision modeling, decision management, or BDM.
Sure. So let me take a stab at the first step. What do we mean by decisions? Well, overwhelmingly, what we're talking about here is the kind of operational decision that you make in the context of a transaction. Should I pay this client? What discount should I give this order? What's the right offer to make to this customer as they check out? Those kinds of single question, single answer kinds of transactional decisions are really at the core of it. And you can use DMN to model a very wide range of decisions, but these highly repeatable ones that have a very direct impact on the business process and on the actors in the business process are really where DMN shines and where decision modeling has tremendous value. Now, that doesn't mean they have to be automated. One of the sort of key things about DMN and about the approach we describe is that you can use these modeling approaches to model a completely manual decision that you need to make. Perhaps you've got to train lots of claims adjusters how to make the same decision. You can use it to model a decision you're going to completely automate and embed in your website. And perhaps most importantly, you can also use it when what you need to end up with is a mix where people are making some of the decision and systems are making some of it sort of in combination with.
So one question we get asked a lot is, why bother to model decisions? What's the business case for doing this? What's the value of it? Well, decision models are very precise. They bring decision making, if you like, out of the shadows. They make decisions an explicit corporate asset which can be actively managed. They are so precise, in fact, that with the right tools, they can be made completely executable. And this means that they can become a living embodiment of your business decisions, being both documentation and implementation at the same time. If you like, they become the prime record of your decision-making approach. And this removes the need for paper specifications that get rapidly out of date anyway, and also eliminates the requirement to translate a specification into an implementation, often a very error-prone step. It also allows business subject matter experts to simulate the behavior of decision-making that they've captured in order to test it and understand it better. The act of modeling decisions promotes a much more systematic understanding of them, and this has got several consequences on its own. First of all, it tends to reveal flaws and contradictions and omissions in the definition of decision, allowing their integrity to be improved. It allows the data needs to be correctly understood much earlier than might otherwise be the case, meaning that the required and only the required input data can be provisioned well in advance. This reduced the costs of accidentally over-providing and the delays of finding out quite late in the day that you're missing a key piece of information. Decision modeling also permits the influence of specific business knowledge on individual decisions to be understood and made explicit, allowing us, for example, to see how company standards and policies, local expertise, and external constraints, such as regulatory compliance mandates, govern our decision-making. Modeling the dependencies decisions have on data and on knowledge, and indeed on other decisions, also helps with impact analysis, understanding the consequences of a modification to input data or business knowledge, and helping the necessary change control that results in our decision-making. Decision models offer a precise definition, as I've said, free from any coding constructs, and this means that decisions become much more transparent to everyone in an organization once you start to model them, opening the door to a better shared understanding of the decisions and collaborative improvement. In fact, one of the best side effects of this we've seen with our clients is the fact that decision models often get used as training aids for newcomers to a company. Decision models are hierarchical. They can divide decisions into their separate constituents, supporting the representation of the most complex decisions, providing great scalability, and managing complexity very effectively. It's a kind of divide and conquer effect. And this is the key difference between decisions and rules. And lastly, decision modeling is an effective means of integrating analytic, optimization, and even cognitive decisions with more straightforward business rule-based logic to form a coherent whole. It frames the use of analytic and cognitive technologies, helping us to structure decisions with many different elements.
Right, and that's sort of one of the sort of key ways in which these pieces fit together. I mean, this is a graphic, one of the 220 illustrations from the book, trying to show the sort of the relationship of these things. You know, organizations make a lot of decisions. That's the sort of overall cloud, of which not all of them are manageable or modelable, but many are. So there's this set of repeatable decisions that we want to make consistently that are suitable for modeling and management. And then what we want to do is we want to manage as many of those decisions as we can, right? Now, managing a decision doesn't mean automating it, right? We might build a decision management system to completely automate a decision. We might build a decision support system to partially automate a decision and help somebody make the rest of it. We may, as Jan just said, just model a manual decision so that we can be clear how this group of people are all meant to make this decision nice and consistently. Regardless of how we're trying to manage the decision modeling has tremendous value. It allows us to be explicit about it, to manage that complexity, and to show what the right mix of technologies and people is to make a particular decision effectively and have the way we make that decision materially contribute to our business results.
And James, for some of our members that may not be familiar with DMN, we're talking about decision modeling using DMN. Some folks are probably more familiar with BPMN. Could I ask you just to explain to folks that relationship and what DMN is?
Sure. So DMN is an open industry standard, and as you say, it's from the same organization that people are familiar with for BPMN or for UML, the Object Management Group. And this is an organization that's very well established in the standards community, manages a lot of open standards. And so DMN is another open industry standard. There's been built with contributions from a lot of very experienced vendors in the space, Decision Management Solutions for one, but also FICO, IBM, Oracle, Sapiens, TIBCO, Signavio, a number of other participants now, adding more sort of vendor experience, industry experience into the standard. It's designed to be an extensible standard, and it's under, like all standards, continuous revision, so we continue to tweak it and update it. And there's now at least 14 tools available that support DMN in some format or another. And so DMN not only is this open standard, it also integrates with these other standards. So there's defined links between it and the business motivation model, very well defined links between it and the business process model and notation, BPMN. There's some easy to use ways to integrate it with things like UML, and so it's designed to be part of this sort of family of standards from the Object Management Group that supports this, provides this sort of standardized bridge between how people think about decisions, business decisions, and how one goes about implementing them in our day-to-day business. And the standard's got sort of two key layers that that get talked about a lot. There's a requirements level. This is where you can manage that complexity. You can break down the problem into pieces and describe how the decision is structured. And then for each piece of that model, you can describe the logic, the decision logic, the rules for that level. And DMN has notational support and semantics for both pieces of this model. And it's probably worth spending just a minute quickly going through each of those levels. So this is a requirements model. This has a number of elements. It's got a subject decision. So in this case, we're trying to decide what marketing offer we're going to make. And to do that, we need certain data. So we have input data, the flattened ovals, representing sort of logical pieces of data, objects in UML or entities in an entity diagram, the logical sort of groups of facts that I have available to me when I make a decision. I've also got decision sort of decompositions. Jan said one of the key things in DMN is this ability to break the problem down into pieces. And so you've got these sub-decisions. In order to make the subject decision, I have to make other decisions, and I have to make those other decisions first. I need the answers that come from those decisions before I can make my final decision. So this allows me to break down my problem and link these things together with what's called information requirements. So I require this information to decide what marketing offer I need. I require information about the marketing offers. I require information about the customer I'm making the offer to. I require information about what product would be a suitable one to offer, what value of an offer to make, and whether now is a good moment or not. Without that information, I can't make the decision. So I can be very explicit about what information I need and where that information comes from. But I can also track where I get the knowledge that I need to make this decision, the how. I've got to describe, someone's got to give me a policy or a regulation or a best practice or an analytic, something that tells me how to make this decision. So these are modeled too. These are called knowledge sources, and those have what's called an authority requirement. So this kind of diagram not only shows me the structure of my decision and what data it needs and where that data is needed, it also shows me where I might expect to get the guidance I need to make the decision. So that's the requirements level. And I'll let Jan talk a little bit about the logic level.
Thanks, James. So this is the second view of DNM's two views. And what's important to realize is for every one of the decisions that James showed us just now, optionally one can define the logic of it. And this is one illustration of how the logic can be defined. Now, a popular and long-established structure for representing logic is, of course, the decision table or truth table. Most listeners will be familiar with this concept. DMN reuses this idea and standardizes the format to promote collaboration between modelers. You can see an example decision table here that I want to talk about. So decision tables define how to determine the outcome of a decision, often made of one or more outputs, given the value of one or more inputs. For example, in this case, how to define someone's personal credit rating given their employment record and their debt-salary ratio. Now, decision table inputs can be sourced from input data, as James has already shown us, which itself is provided from other systems, or maybe it's captured interactively. Or indeed, it can be provided by the outcome of sub-decisions that have to be made first. Decision tables are always named after their outcome, and the name appears, as you can see there, in the top right-hand corner, personal credit rating. The inputs are shown in blue column headers to the left of the double line, in this case, the person's employment record, and the debt to salary ratio. And the outputs, and in this example there's only one output, are shown in the pink column headers on the right-hand side of the double line. In this particular case, it's the personal credit rating. That's what this particular decision is designed to determine. The table has one or more rules which dictate the value or values of the outcome. And our particular example has 5 rules represented as individually numbered rows on this table, each consisting of a set of conditions and conclusion values. For every rule, one condition is specified for each input, and one conclusion value is provided for each output. And if all of the conditions of the rule in any one of those numbered rules, if they're all satisfied, if all the conditions are satisfied, then the output values of that rule become part of the outcome of the decision. We say the rule is hit. For example, if we look at rule number 4, if the person's employment record is average and their debt-salary ratio is greater than 2, then their personal credit rating is B. Hyphen conditions mean that the value of a particular input is immaterial to the success of this rule. So if we look at rule number 5, which is highlighted there, what we're saying is that the person's employment record, if it's poor, then their personal credit rating is always C, regardless of their debt-to-salary ratio. A hit policy, and you can see that on the top left, is used to determine how many rules can be hit when the decision table is used and how many outcomes can result. In this example, the hit policy is unique, or U, which means that only one rule can be hit. That's the reason why the conditions in this particular decision table are mutually exclusive. Now, decision tables are a succinct way of representing this kind of homogeneous, very similar structured business rules, but it's important to note that decision tables are not the only representation of decision logic in DMN. Analytic, optimization decisions can also be defined. It's a common misconception that DMN is all about decision tables, whereas in fact this is just one of many ways of representing decision logic.
Well, and Jan, so you've educated our folks about DMN being a notation. Do you guys have any recommendations on the best approaches for applying it?
Yeah, that's a great question, Greg. I mean, one of the things when we were writing the book is like, well, do we want to write a book about the standard, or do we want to write a book about decision modeling with the standard? And we made a very explicit choice, as Jan said earlier, to write a book about decision modeling using the standard. And so we outline a fairly detailed approach in the book. You know, how do you identify decisions that might be good candidates for modeling? How do you describe them? You know, what are the kind of questions and allowed answers that make sense? What's the business and operational context for a decision? How do you capture that? How do you do that initial set of requirements around input data and knowledge sources so that you can start to flesh out the decision-making you're looking at? How do you go through this refinement and iteration process? You know, as Jan said, you can use these models for a lot of different kinds of problems. So sometimes you only need to do a little bit of refinement and iteration because you're really trying to scope a problem or you're trying to understand the boundary conditions for an analytic. But sometimes you need to get into a really detailed model, so there's a lot of iterations. Some folks apply this in an agile approach with these iterations matching their agile iterations. Other people are using this inside a more waterfall approach, and so the iterations are occurring inside a requirements phase. But there's this very iterative development approach to come up with the model and ultimately then complete it so that it is fit for purpose. Another one of the sort of common misconceptions is that a model is no good unless you can generate code from it. In fact, we see tremendous value in projects from models that are not complete enough to generate code. So the approach that's woven through the book is very much focused on not just what does the notation mean, but how can you effectively build good decision models? How can you tell you build a good one? What are some best practices? What are some patterns you should look for? And fit it into this overall decision modeling approach that we've described.
Well, I think that's important, James, especially in the agile environment. Many members of our community have really asked us to focus on requirements gathering in an agile environment, and so I think that's one of the big trends that we'll see for 2017. So tell me, I mean, we don't necessarily, want to be the hammer looking for a nail here. What kind of direction do you give folks in the book about which decisions should be modeled and which ones are maybe not good candidates to be modeled? What kind of criteria do you recommend for folks?
That's a great question. I mean, there are certainly circumstances in which decision modeling is more advantageous than others. If you're considering if a decision should be modeled, you should ask yourself, does it have high value? Does it have high scale? Or is there a need for transparency? All of these factors improve the benefit of decision modeling, and if you have all three, then you really should be very seriously considering it. By high business value, what we mean is that perhaps the decision directly controls customer treatment. Now, for many automated systems, the correctness of our decisions and how well designed they are will be the main perception that customers have about the way our companies work and how good they are to do business with. So we've got to get these decisions absolutely right, and that means we have to model them. Other instances of high business value are decisions which actually determine or affect revenue, or that manage very important risks, like the risk of fraud. By high frequency, we mean decisions which are made perhaps many thousands of times a second. That high frequency, as you like, is a multiplier for the value of the decision. If it's happening a lot, well, it's more important to get it absolutely right. High frequency also covers the need for real-time response, and this can sometimes be required if the outcome of a decision has a value which decays very rapidly in time. For example, in many automated trading systems, a decision's outcome is useless after only a few minutes, and it needs to be made very quickly indeed. High frequency also covers the need for consistency in an organization. So if you need to apply a decision consistently in a lot of different places, and we see this often in finance when we're trying to categorize assets, then you should model it to make sure that it is applied and reused across different processes and different channels. By the need for transparency, we're talking about the fact that either a decision is highly complex and needs to be clearly understood by people in the business, or that it's subject to frequent changes, either instigated from inside the company or imposed on us by outside. And lastly, that it perhaps needs to comply to external regulations or maybe even subject to some kind of audit process. Both of those, or all of those factors, would heighten the need to do decision modeling. Other factors you should consider include, is a decision's business performance measurable? Is it expensive to perform? Is it perhaps very resource intensive, or does it use a lot of people? Or does it have a high cost of error? For example, we might be fined if we get the outcome of a decision wrong. So all of these factors contribute to the value and amplify the benefit of decision modeling, and if they're all largely absent, then the case for it is much weaker.
All right, Jan, thank you for that. Well, I think, we've been able to give folks a good glimpse of the purpose of the book and some of the takeaways that they'll have. I know both you and James are engaged with clients that are working with DMN on a real-time basis, and I'm just curious, are there any common questions or pitfalls you can share with our members that you may have heard from some of your other clients?
Yeah, we get a set of questions that when we were writing the book, we sort of assembled this list. So this was the set of questions that we get most often. So.
Yeah, and the most common ones are the first two, I guess. What is decision modeling and why is it a benefit? Well, we've already kind of covered those two. But the third one, we often get asked, are there many different ways to model decisions, and why are you adopting the one that you show in the book? Well, it's true, there are lots of different ways to model decisions, or a few different ways. But I want to make two different points here, which I think narrow down the options quite considerably. First, it's important, for reasons I've already mentioned, to use a standard notation. If you adopt a standard means of decision modeling, you're more likely to do it consistently, and you're more likely to be able to share the results with other people. And the use of a good standard also helps to ensure that you've captured and covered all the important information in your decision model. Once you accept that you need to use a standard, then really you've only got two choices: DMN, the one we've already explained, and the decision model, or TDM for short. Now, TDM is a very influential predecessor to DMN. It was developed by Knowledge Partners International, now Sapiens, back in 2009. And for many people, it's the first standard that they met for decision modeling. It's responsible for introducing many people to the technique. It's not only a notation, but also a rigorous method as well. Now, although experience of TDM and all of its best practices and its methodology is a huge benefit to any decision modeler, we elected to use DMN rather than TDM as the basis for our book for four main reasons. First of all, DMN is an open standard. It's not owned by a single vendor, but by the OMG. Secondly, it's got a much wider variety of experienced contributors driving its evolution. Thirdly, DMN has many features not yet supported by TDM, some of which we've glimpsed at just now. And lastly, it has much more widespread tool support. So our book covers and compares DMN to TDM, and there's an appendix to help TDM users adapt to the newer standard.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that comes up is like, well, if there's a standards document, and it's quite a big standards document, why do you need a book? And I think we've really tried to address that in the conversation earlier. We've tried to say, look, it's not about DMN, it's not about describing the standard, though we try hard to describe the standard in useful words. It's about how do you build decision models and use the standard. Standards documents, by their nature, tend to be written for people who are writing software, implementing things, trying to worry about interchange. They're not focused on practitioners. That's a sort of deliberate decision on OMG's part. The idea is that people who are practitioners will write books about how to use the standard. And so that's exactly what we've done. So yes, there is a standards document, and if you want to implement the standard in a piece of software, you should read the standards document. But if you're trying to learn how to use someone's tool, then the standard's not terribly helpful, because it just tells you what these things mean and how to interchange them. It doesn't tell you how to use them to describe your business. And I think that's That's really the sort of critical value proposition for the book.
One question we get asked a lot is, what's the difference between decisions and rules? Aren't they the same thing, really? Isn't a decision a kind of rebranded version of a rule? Isn't this just a marketing gimmick? Well, no, it isn't. Decisions and rules are very different to each other. Firstly, decisions and their outcomes are always directly tangible to a business and its clients. For example, if your mortgage application is rejected, that's going to have a big impact on you and on the broker. The business, therefore, will always have very strong opinions about how decisions are made, and decisions will affect the bottom line. In contrast, business rules are often much lower level, and often they're far too fine-grained to be individually widely recognized by either organizations or their clients. Decisions have a clearly defined business value, often expressed in terms of what impact they have on key performance indicators, or how they contribute to business goals. How well a decision meets this goal needs to be measured, monitored, and sometimes subject to continuous improvement. Now, business rules are often far too context-specific and small for this kind of measurement to be effective. And lastly, when it comes to decisions, the buck stops with a business decision. It has to yield a correct outcome in every single case, whereas most business rules, on the other hand, have deliberate gaps in their scope, or they raise exceptions under some circumstances when they're not able to deal with certain inputs.
Yeah, and so lastly, the last question we get is, okay, so this all sounds very lovely, but is it just theoretical, or do you have real examples? And I think Jan and I both have real stories, but I'll share quickly one from actually this week. I've just been working with a large high-tech manufacturer, and their data science team is adopting decision modeling because they find that they need clarity in what decision their data science, their analytics are designed to improve, and that the best way to get that is to build a decision model. And they find they have been able to redirect and give purpose to projects that have sort of lost their way, that they can keep everybody focused and avoid sort of chasing after bright, shiny objects. And they can really close the gap between their business people who understand what the business problem is and the data science team who know how to use the data and the analytic techniques by having a shared decision model that says, here's the decision making we're trying to improve, here's where the data science is going to help, let's go do that. And so it's a great example of the power of decision modeling to really help an organization sort of rethink how it approaches its problems. That's got nothing to do with rules, and it's got nothing to do with executable models, and everything to do with building a shared understanding of business decision making, which is really the sort of essence of DMN. But I know Jan's got some great stories too.
Thanks, James. Yeah, we were recently involved in a coordinated set of 14 internationally distributed regulatory compliance projects as part of a single client initiative. And that was really greatly helped by decision modeling. Decision modeling enabled accurate and precise communication of business needs across many teams in different places in the world. So it's just like James said there, it really did help to promote a shared and deep understanding of the decisions being made. And it was much more successful than the ad hoc Excel-based techniques which had been used prior to that point. Business subject matter experts and other business stakeholders could effectively participate in the decision definition and review process in a way that they'd not been able to in the past, because decision models were usually more ad hoc, or even worse, they weren't created explicitly at all, but they were inherent in the code or in a business rule management system, which was much less approachable from a business stakeholder point of view. So we got a much deeper business engagement as a result of using decision modeling. Many of the regulatory specifications we had to support are very complex, requiring consistency across the organization and frequent change. And our clients were quite impressed with the ability of decision modeling to address all of these issues using hierarchies of collaborating decisions, using the improved decision reuse that I talked about, and in supporting a more rigorous impact analysis when we were faced with changes imposed on us by regulators. Decision modeling fostered a far better traceability as well between regulatory specifications regulatory decisions and the compliance documents that they were designed to uphold. And this gave us a direct indication of our regulatory coverage, and we could tie the individual decisions back to the section of the regulations that they addressed. And this often revealed flaws in the regulations themselves, which meant we could promptly report those back to the authorities.
All right, guys. Well, thank you very much. I think, from the BPM Institute's perspective, the combination of decision modeling with DMN represents some really powerful capabilities. And, for those organizations and individuals that are, looking to make their organization's decisions more transparent and agile and scalable, to look into DMN in more detail. Now, I want to thank you guys for extending a few exclusive offers to our members. There is a complimentary chapter to the book that's available on bpminstitute.org. If you go to our resource section and under books, you'll find a free chapter there that James and Jan have been kind enough to provide us if you want to get a sneak preview of what's in the book. And if you're already sold and you're ready to jump on board and grab one, they've also extended a discount that you can activate by using any of the links that are on here. From there, if you're looking for additional opportunities to get more education and more information on DMN, I would encourage you to subscribe to our DMN bulletin on BPM Institute. And also you can refer to our new digital decisioning and analytics training roadmap. You'll find that in the Learning Path document where James leads our training efforts in this area as well that take place at our events as well as online and also in-house. And so if you're looking to train up your team on DMN, we know a guy who can do a great job at that for you. So both James Taylor with Decision Management Solutions and Jan Purchase with Lux Magi, I want to thank you both for sharing your new book with our members. It's quite an accomplishment, and we wish you all the best in 2017. Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much.
Thanks very much.